Hello, a very good evening, and welcome along to another episode of MotoGP Live, a sit down with. My name is Jack Appleyard with you once again, and we've got two more cracking guests coming up over the next hour or so. First, 500cc Grand Prix race winner, and I'm glad to say a friend and colleague as well, our very own MotoGP pit lane reporter, Simon Crafar. And with him, his very good friend, a five-time 500cc Premier Class race winner, and of course, a MotoGP legend, Mick Doohan. There they are. We're going to be chatting over the next hour or so about MotoGP 2020, your careers as well. But first of all, good evening, Simon. How are you? First time that we've had the chance to catch up since the Qatar test.
Yeah, it's been a while, isn't it? I've been doing my best to stay busy and sane at home, doing jobs around the house like everyone.
Well, it's great to see you, Simon. Mick, you flew into Europe yesterday, so I hope you're not too tired. Thanks for joining us. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well. It's good to be back in Europe, to be honest. It's, the whole world's gone a little bit crazy. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic sort of overtaken everything. And unfortunately, 2020 has been put on hold. But hopefully with MotoGP and a few other things starting up, we can get back to some normality. And hopefully by the end of the year, we're back in full song.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Well, the good news is, for some reason, if you're living under a rock, the MotoGP calendar for 2020 has been released today. So no better place to start than with that. Obviously, Simon, first things first, great news that we're going to be back.
Oh, good to, it must be the same for everyone involved, meaning work-wise. We all want to get back, whether you're a rider, mechanic, team manager, the press people, everybody must, got to be happy to get back to work. It's time.
So you can see on the right-hand side of your screen there, this is the calendar. So we're going to be open the MotoGP season. Of course, we mustn't forget the fact that Moto2 and Moto3 started their years in Qatar. But MotoGP will kick off in Jerez with back-to-back races on back-to-back weekends. A weekend off, then we're off to the Czech Republic in Brno. And then we've got two races at the Red Bull Ring. We'll then have two races at Misano before a race at the Catalunya circuit, at Le Mans, two races at Aragon and two races at Valencia before then hopefully we'll be able to have maybe 4 flyaway rounds with a decision on that coming by the end of July. So Mick, the main thing that stands out for me there is the number of back-to-back races at the same circuit. It's something that has never been done before, or certainly in recent memory. How do you foresee those races going? Certainly rounds 1 and then rounds 2.
It's, I guess, unusual for a world championship to run it back to back, or the same venue back to back, I should say. But at the end of the day, it's still a championship. The weather's different each weekend. It could be raining one weekend, it could be windy, it could be whatever. But it's no different than any other championship, a national championship where you go to the same circuit. At the end of the day, you're still competing against the best people at that particular point in time. So it'll be real racing against real champions in a real format. So yeah, it's different. There won't be any spectators perhaps at this point in time, especially at the beginning, but it'll still be exciting. And I think we just got to put that behind us. It is what it is, and we're just sort of glad that it can start up again. But the racing will still be very tough. And I think, as I say, and Simon will tell you, each day, even when you go testing at a circuit, some days it's completely different than other days. So, it's a challenge, but I'm sure all these guys will be up for it, and we're just thankful it's starting again.
Simon, do you agree with that? How do you foresee those back-to-back rounds going?
Yeah, good point Mick said about conditions, because you can literally go testing at a track and a week later go testing there and can't quite do the same times for whatever reason, track conditions or weather, or so there is going to be that to, when I first heard about having two races at the same track, putting all your effort and your mind, 100% into doing everything you can one weekend and then having to repeat it, I kind of went, and then I thought about it. Like Mick said, conditions change, but also, if you're, it's giving more opportunity to guys like rookies or have only been in MotoGP a short time, or only been on that bike a short time, I think there's going to be more advantage to them. I think there'll be more of a chance of, guys like Joan Mir, or let me say Miguel Oliveira, guys like that who aren't as familiar with their machinery as Marquez, getting closer that second weekend. That's what I'm hoping.
Mick, who do you think that it will sort of give an advantage to, or who might be able to benefit from a calendar like this?
Look, Simon's on the money for sure there. Equally, the good guys at the front, the Marquezes and etc., they're going to be strong week in, week out, regardless of the circuits. But as Simon rightly said, the guys who are still working out their machinery, and it's also going to be good for the factories who need to get a bit of more time on for testing and whatever. At least they've got a familiar circuit. The conditions might change, but they're going to have more race miles, more race sort of official testing, official practice, etc., to really focus in on getting the bike right. So, that's a good point, Simon, that I think some of these guys, although it's still going to be tough to beat the likes of Mark and whoever else is going to challenge him this year, but it's certainly going to be an advantage for some of the guys who are struggling to get the most out of the motorcycle. It will allow them to focus on certain parts of the bike where they feel they could need to improve, but by the time they go to a next circuit, it's got its own problems, and they're trying to work on those. So it could bring along a change for 2021. Really, it could develop the second tier bike, so to speak, better for 2021.
And that's obviously what we're hoping. If we can get a closer championship, it's certainly better for the spectator, the viewer. Do you think that the fact that we will see so many races at the same circuit, that will mean that the margins between the guys at the front and the back is just going to be that closer?
Well, you never know. Last year there were some great races, so it'd be nice if that was the case. But at the end of the day, it'll still come down to whoever's the strongest, whoever's willing to fight the hardest all the way through. And the moment, if you go off the last few seasons, there's nobody sort of willing to put it on the line more so than there has been Marc Marquez. Week in, week out, he's got his other challenges, but hopefully, you never know what drives people on the off season. And this off season certainly been long. So hopefully there's a whole bunch of them up there racing, and the being on the same circuit back to back weekends might just encourage a bit more closer racing. But it doesn't necessarily always work out that way, unfortunately.
Simon, who've you got your eye on in 2020? We've seen some footage of Maverick Viñales, Fabio Quartararo, Alex Rins there as well. Is there anyone else that springs to mind for you?
Yeah, you've pretty much named my first pick anyway. The thing is, when we last saw everyone riding in anger on track right at the end of that test, it was like a bit of a qualifying in Qatar. And you mentioned Maverick Viñales. He was on fire, and I know he's been a bit of a test champion in the past, and it hasn't come good, when we've got to the races, but he's a genius on a bike. And I really think if his confidence, he seems like he's happier with the bike now. He's happier with his crew chief, which was a past problem. If he can, the bike is better. I think they've closed the gap a little on the Honda. I really have my fingers crossed that Maverick can do what I think most of us believe he can, fingers crossed for him.
Yeah, certainly. If he can be up there at the front, that would be great. Aside from the calendar, obviously focusing on 2021, which seems crazy to say when the 2020 calendar was released today, but from an Australian perspective, Mick, obviously Jack Miller has been confirmed in the factory Ducati team from next year. How great is it to see another Aussie up there in one of the best teams in the MotoGP paddock again?
It's great news for Jack. He's had a great run with the Pramac Ducati team, and equally the Pramac team have had a few guys come through in the past with riders coming through to the factory team. It's a great junior team, if that's what you want to call it, for Ducati. So he's on the right equipment now. So, if Jack is showing that he's actually fast enough to qualify on pole. He's fast enough to run at the front. He just needs that final piece, and hopefully the Works Ducati might just be that final piece. But and a bit of maturity. He's been in the game now for some time in the top class. So, he's only going to get better. He's maturing, and the time could be his, and hopefully Ducati have got the bike right.
Simon, is he deserving of that promotion up to the factory seat?
Oh, I'm really happy for him. Mick mentioned about maturity, and Jack really surprised me at Valencia last year. How he managed to hold off, factory dukes behind him, a guy as experienced and clever, as Dovi, and made, pretty much the same machine finish in front of Dovi. I was like, wow, I think that was the first time I thought Jack is ready, really he's figured out the difficult bit of getting those tires to go, the machine to go all the way to the end, and now he's got the opportunity. I'm super happy for him.
Well, 5 podiums it was last year, and now he's getting his upgrade for 2021. Of course, he will be still with Pramac for 2020 when the season gets underway in July. Another of the big rumours at the moment, not confirmed yet, but obviously Mick, as a Honda man, it'd be great to get your view on this. Pol Espargaro has been linked, has been Marc Marquez's teammate from 2021 onwards. What do you make of that? How do you see that relationship?
I've got no idea. It's just a bit. It's a bit odd that Alex has been kicked off the bike before he's even done a race. So who knows what's happening behind the scenes? I certainly don't. But I just find it odd that Alex hasn't been given a shot at riding. So if he does a great season, starts the season well and is going strong, what then? Are they going to put on another bike for him, or is there another position for him? But it's I only heard this the other day about Pol, and certainly I'm sure he'd do well on the bike. But I honestly, I'm not that close to the Honda team. I'm not that close to the rumor mill. So for me, I've got really no comment other than what I've just said.
Of course. And Simon, what do you make of it? Could you see Espargaro and Honda being a happy relationship?
Well, I think it was a clever and, from Honda's point of view, obvious move if they want to just put someone on a bike next to Marc that they know can make a difficult handling, steering, whatever, fast V4 motorcycle go fast. He's proven he can do that, So there's a very good chance you put him on another little bit difficult handling, very fast V4. He'll do it as well. So I think that's clever from their side. And the other next thing I thought was, that's going to upset Marc. Exactly what Mick is saying, that you're taking his brother off of, out of that team before he's even really been given a chance. But I think he got the chance because there wasn't a spot in a satellite team, like LCR. And they're obviously thinking, if this is happening, they're obviously thinking to put him in LCR, give him a year or two, and then if he's doing the job, bring him through to the factory team like the normal progression is. That's my thoughts on it.
It's certainly going to be interesting nevertheless, and obviously stick to MotoGP.com for whenever any news is confirmed. Just finally on 2020 and 2021 as well, before we move on to you guys and your careers. Obviously, Valentino Rossi, always a huge talking point. Linked with Petronas Yamaha for 2021 or possibly retirement as well. Mick, what do you make of Valentino's decision? Where would you like to see him? I'm sure, as with everybody else, you'd love to see him remain on the MotoGP grid.
Yeah, absolutely. Wherever he wants to be, that's great. He's certainly not showing the signs of somebody who's just ready to retire just yet. He fights harder than most on the circuit, regardless where he qualifies. He ends up being sort of on the podium or close enough to the front. So, he's sort of deservingly in the right position at the moment. If he's going to be with the Petronas Yamaha, Currently it's a satellite team. I'm not sure to what level the differences is between both bikes, let alone one of the bikes. I believe one might be fairly close and the other a bit like the Ducati Pramac team. But if Valentino's going to that team, he might have a little bit of influence with Yamaha to enable him to get the right amount of equipment. But whilst he remains in the sport, I think it's good for the sport. And if he wants to ride, well, good on him. He certainly loves riding. You see him; he's always out dirt bike riding. He's doing this, so why give up if he's fit? He's mentally sharp. So, and he's showing the young guys, sort of 20 years younger than him, that he can actually sort of run with them and beat them. So I think it's great. He's got a whole generation of different people, or different generations, I should say, of fans watching him, and that can only be good for everyone. And it'll be a sad day when he retires, but like with everyone else, the sport will move on, but he'll never be forgotten.
Yeah, certainly. Well said. So that is 2020 and 2021 in a nutshell. Let's move on to you guys, shall we? Starting with you, Simon, then. I said at the top of the show that both you and Mick are good friends. So I'll get the pair of you just to say how you first heard the name Simon Crafar or Mick Doohan. When did you first become aware of Mick, Simon?
Everybody became aware of Mick. If you watched the sport at all, when he demolished World Superbike guys, when they all turned up to Oran Park and Mick just bolted, and then there was all the rumours about, he won both races, demolished them, and you're talking World Championship racing guys, a national championship guy doing that made the world sit up. And then I remember rumours of Yamaha, if I remember correct, wanting you, Mick, and then Honda stealing you at the last moment, something like that, vague memory. And so, from my point of view, when somebody in your sport does something like that, and just rockets, rockets to the top, meaning everyone wants them on their factory machine in Grand Prix, it's like when you want to get there, you'll never forget it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's the same as when anyone wins. You never forget them because you want to be there, And Mick was like that. He was like a hero for me. I was like, wow, he's just showing what can be done if you've got the determination and talent. And I wanted to follow in his footsteps, but maybe I didn't have as much of either of those two things. But yeah, I got to meet him a few years later because I was Mick's brother, Scott. We were teammates at the 8 Hour, in the same team anyway, two different bikes. But and then became teammates for a little bit longer that year, and then a couple of years later in Malaysia, we were teammates again. So through Scott, I got to know Mick.
Mick, how did your relationship with Simon Stowell all come together then?
Yeah, no, it's pretty much as Simon says. Well, thanks, Simon. That's very kind words. But at the end of the day, I think also getting through with the factories back in those days, it was a lot easier. The progression going from national to international was a lot easier. There's so many platforms today that it's sort of, you get lost in the amount of different championships which you need to be riding in before you can get real opportunity. But yeah, meeting Simon in Japan with a guy by the name of Morinaga, a Yamaha dealer in Japan, who Simon was racing for. I rode for him the first time I went to Japan, and Super Angel, pink and black, or black and pink leathers and so on. A great guy, and helped out some Kiwi and Aussie guys, including my brother. So I think we met up in Japan, and then also Simon, you were doing the World Superbike stuff, and then come and did well with the MotoGP. Well, 500cc it was called back then.
Yeah, so what happened is I'd met Mick a few times, and then decided to spend the summers, so the European winters, somewhere warm and training with other racers on the Gold Coast in Australia, and that's Mick's stomping ground. So through Scott, Mick came and picked me up, my wife and I, and just was awesome to us, you know, and I don't say that because we're online here. Mick went out of his way to show us around the Gold Coast, to take us out, you know, on the boat on the water, to start training together, and made me feel really welcome. So I really appreciate it, Mick. It was awesome, you know, getting to see your hometown like that.
Yeah, well, it was your hometown there at one point as well, so, you know, in and out of there.
For the summers, yeah.
No, absolutely. Well, that was the same, you know, we were sort of all based out in Europe here, and just head back there when it got too cold, and it was a great place to test. You know, you train and also test because, you know, and I think less so now, there's less testing, but you'd be testing in Southeast Asia and testing in Australia, and then you'd come back up into Europe. So it was a great place to base yourself, and still is. But yeah, we used to go down and mess around and train. You know, thankfully today I don't have to train too much, so it's much easier.
Hey, I've got to butt in there, Jack, and say, to tell the listeners about Mick and training. You know, I when I agreed to start training with Mick, I didn't know what I was getting in for. Like, I got to start by saying that, without exaggerating, I was the strongest rider in the gym, meaning all the races that I trained with couldn't push more or heavier weights, or, you know. And then I started training with Mick and got out on a bicycle, and he trained literally, without exaggerating, like an animal. Like, it was seriously hard. Sorry, I know I'm not exaggerating, Mick, because anyone else that came along went. And so we had a lot of guests because of who Mick is. And so I would turn up just to ride with Mick some mornings, and there was like, I remember Michael Schumacher one day.
Wow, really?
And that was cool. The three of us went riding, and he was super impressive because up until that point, the car races were on the soft side, weren't they, mate? We'd eventually go, okay, mate, we'll see you on the way back. You know, we'd bolt and pick him up on the way back. But Michael rode with us hard out the whole. He was really impressive. His training in the gym was quite different. He did a lot of like neck training and stuff, like trying to handle those G-forces. But
no, he was.
And then Mick,
he was one of the only guys that you trained with, and then you knew you were up for a hard hit out. You know, one day you'd beat him, and you know he'd come back, and then you know, you'd be struggling to beat him the next time. So we kept pushing each other. But yeah, you're right. I mean, as far as car guys, they'd certainly sort of roll out of the throttle a little bit earlier than he would. He was he certainly trained, and certainly sort of, even today I had lunch with some XF1 guys, and they were talking about how he used to train. So, you know, just on coincidentally, you know, because the guy was just pushed it further than anybody else, and that's why he was so dominant when he was racing as well. He had the same mindset.
Do you feel like you were?
So to give,
go ahead, Simon.
No, to give the listeners how hard Mick pushed. You know, like, to all the time I trained with Mick, I knew I was doing good over a period if I got close enough to stay with him the whole ride. You know, I was really happy with that. And like, for example, to give you an idea what sort of level Mick was pedaling away at. Mick, who was the blonde, curly-haired triathlete world champion that came out with us one day? He was on the Kellogg's cornflake box, and he was a really well-known guy. I can't remember his name.
Miles Stewart, was it, or was it?
That rings a bell.
Maybe he was a world champion triathlete, triathlon guy. So I'm not sure whether it was him or one of the other guys.
Well, there's him and his mate came with us, and like, the best I could do towards the top of the climb at the end, it was a long one. I remember like 70 Ks or something. And towards the end of the climb, I could just see you guys. It was, you know, about 3-4 corners up. And I was trying to see what was happening. And sure enough, Mick is pushing him all the way to the top of the hill, you know, jumping back in front. And gives you an idea how hard this man pushed, you know, training-wise. It was almost like you'd prefer to hurt yourself than lose a training run.
But you know, Simon, it's the mental game. You don't need to push yourself that much, you know, to be involved with motorsport, cars, bikes, or whatever. But it's mentally knowing that you're doing more than everybody else, like you said, that when you're in the gym, doing more than the next guy. So you end up, it just kept compounding. You keep pushing yourself more and more and more, you know, at the end of the day, you didn't know where it had stopped. But, you know, plus it was enjoyable. You'd get out and you'd have a good hit out, and you'd come back and you'd feel like you actually completed something. And you know, when you show up, when you were showing up for the races, you knew that you didn't leave any stone unturned, and you were prepared to go out and race whoever was challenging you that weekend.
You obviously had a great relationship off the track. How did that transfer into the paddock and on the track as well, Simon?
Well, for quite a few years we trained together, and I was doing World Superbikes, Mick was doing 500, and then when I got the opportunity to ride the 500 off-season training again, Mick again did something I'll never forget. Was warned me, gave me a couple of tips about how not to get high-sided at that first test, which was good. You know, I don't know if you remember, Mick. You're telling me it's not your bike, mate. Run it near the red, so it drops off in power. So when it gets out a bit sideways, it doesn't have any more RPM and it'll hang there, rather than right at it before you can catch it and it launching you off. I don't know if you remember that, but I really appreciate that. Then when it got to this sort of period that we're watching on the screen here, Mick got a little bit more difficult. It wasn't a casual relationship. I remember this weekend, you know how you were, Mick. You were like, you wanted to smash us all, you know, and it wasn't particularly friendly when I got near. But as your mechanics kindly told me, said, take it as a compliment, mate.
Yeah, you know, and it's you know, at the end of the day, it's competition, and you know, everyone wanted to win, and so you play the game whichever way you needed to have it. You know, the easiest way you could see it to get to the end result, and that was, you know, whether it be playing a little bit of mind games, you know, mentally, you know, there was nothing in it as far as there was certainly no malice in it. It was just the way you'd apply. Well, what am I trying to say? I guess, you know, yes, we're live on television, so I can't use those type of words. But I wasn't the nicest sort of person, as friendly as I have been. But there was a method to my madness. It was just to sort of keep you guessing as to what I'm actually, where am I? What's he thinking? So I didn't really want you to, or want any competitor to be fair, to know exactly what I was thinking, or where you could make an edge, or where you could find a fault in me. So it was just easier to be a little bit cold, I guess, but generally away from the track, I was a little bit different.
Now, obviously, this race that we're looking at here is the 1998 Assen TT. The race itself was probably, would you say, that the first fight between the pair of you?
It's the first time I got to lead, Mick, I think. Apart from the day before for a little bit on the screen, qualifying. But the first time I got to lead a Grand Prix and be in front of Mick. I don't know if you remember, Mick, when you got back in front of me, you'd told me you went on a training run one day that you'd poked your knee in the dirt, like the tracks were back then, had a bit of dirt on the inside to spray the guy behind with stones, you know, to make him lose concentration a bit. And you got me that day with that, and a few holes in the screen.
But yeah, little things like that, as you say, there wasn't always curbs on every turn, and especially back at Assen, I think, as well. So yeah, little things like that to just distract the concentration of whoever was behind you to just break the concentration, to see if they could make a little mistake to give you that little bit of an edge. But most certainly, like that year there, you know, you were the class of the field on the Yamaha. You know, the Dunlop tires were certainly working well, but when they weren't working, they were horrific. So, you know, so it wasn't really a balanced type of season for you as far as having good, consistent tires. But equally, you rode the bike better than the majority of the other Yamaha guys. So, you know, I think that was, you know, that was you coming. You know, you really seemed to gel with the bike that year, and you know, had a couple of good hit outs, especially some qualifying runs. You were sort of well and truly head and shoulders above the rest. So, credit where credit's due. You sort of deserved everything you got that year. It was just a shame whatever happened the following year didn't work out with the Michelin.
We saw you start from pole position of those highlights there, Mick. And obviously, the day before that race was probably one of the greatest qualifying sessions or pole position laps of all time. To set the scene here, the red flag has gone out with 2 minutes to go. Simon, you're on provisional pole position. Mick, you've just exited pit lane. Simon, what are you thinking at this point? On provisional pole with 2 minutes to go, do you think it's in the bag?
When they stopped at red flag 2 minutes to go, I thought, I've timed it perfect. I just put my last rear tyre in, got the time, then the red flag was out, So I'd done everything I could. I got the time I wanted. I thought I'd done everything necessary, And then this determined, I can't say the next word on the screen. Look, I'm going, no way. He's having a go. And you're talking cold temperatures. He's on the Michelins back then, which weren't very forgiving. And he's going to try to go faster than anyone with the one flyer. And I was like, wow. And I'm like, he's going to have a go. Now I'm thinking he's really going to have a go, and he's lined it up. Then the first split when he's under, I'm like, holy, he's going to try and do it. I didn't think it was possible. I'll be straight up in those temperatures. What are you thinking right now, man?
Well, that's, if you go back to the start of that there, I knew I had to get out of the, I knew I couldn't just be parked up behind everyone waiting to go out of the pit lane. So I needed to get a bit of a run out of the pit lane to even make it around before the checkered flag, So the majority of them didn't actually make it across the start finish before the session was finished. So, Arbe following me through there, got a toe off me with that, but it was only him and maybe one other guy got through. But, I thought there was a chance if I could get out and get a clear lap and I could make it across before the checkered flag was out, there was a possibility. So again, as you say, we just threw a rear tyre in and I had to go out quick to get some heat into the tyre and then just try and run, and it just all come together. So I didn't really know until I crossed the line that it was a good lap. It felt good all the way around, but when I come across the line and seen the time, I thought, okay, well, that worked.
Mick, I remember saying effing awesome when you went under on a split, he's going to do it. And I said to my mechanic, Hamish Jamison, if Mick does this, I've got to say, it's so impressive. I've got to go and shake his hand. When you were under the first split or two, and then at the end, Hamish said, you better go shake his hand, So I walked down there and shook your hand because I was honestly, there's nothing you can do to stop this guy today. You fully deserve that. You put your body on the line, to do it, and you did it. So I marched off down and shook your hand, and I remember I know you well, and you looked at me like you hated me. I was like really taken aback.
No. It was just, like you're saying, it was just like, okay, well, you were sitting on pole and you go out there and you just try and do your best. You're just trying to one-upmanship, if I can try and demoralize you with a one lap, then let's try and do it, and that's what it was all about back then. You're sort of going out there, and that's what was motivating me anyway, is just to try and keep pushing myself, keep pushing the bike, and winning races was what it was all about. And just whether it be qualifying or whether it be a practice session or whatever. And I think it's similar with some of the guys there today. That's what motivates you. You want to be the best. You want to be the quickest. You want to be. And it wasn't so much that it was. I hated you. It was just like, well, what did you think of that? So.
Gotcha.
Simon, we saw you.
But I think the listeners need to know that there's no traction control on those things. They are vicious, tiny little crankshafts, big power, and it's a cold day, and you're on the Michelins of that time, which are not super forgiving. And to me, that was like, there's such a fine line between doing what you did and really hurting yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's what was so impressive for everybody that day, especially riders that knew what it took.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then, the Assen circuit wasn't forgiving either. With back in those days with the crest in the middle of the road, being like a typical road course. It was. I'm not sure whether it was still a street track at that point in time, but so the camber would change as you're going from one side to the other with your lean angle, so you need to be cautious with that. But anyway, it was a lot of fun, and that's what made and that's what competition's all about, isn't it? Wondering if you can actually, going out there, go, I think I can do it, but wonder if I can, and then you cross the line, and the same as you sitting in the pit box going, well, I don't think you can. So that's what makes it exciting, and still does today.
Hey, we got my good day here, I think.
We do.
Yeah,
I was
exactly.
going to say, Simon, we saw you after the Assen lap just shrug your shoulders and say there was not much that I could do. I would imagine that's what most guys throughout mixed dominance in the late 90s felt. But this was your day in the sunshine, winning at Donington Park. What are your memories of that day?
Well, after Assen, the last laps of Assen, the last two, I think, I didn't fight for it. I looked behind and saw nobody's there, and I knew everyone in the paddock was going to go, basically call me a masturbator if I crashed out of a podium, and my first ever podium. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I had to get that one in the bag. And then I went, right, I've got that one in the bag. I'm going to go 100% on the next one, risk that last little bit. And it happened to be Donington, where I knew, it was a track I knew well. I'd done the British Championship. Dunlop knew it well, so their tyres worked well there. And, I did what I think the Yamaha could do all year if it was used to the limit, The Honda had some advantages, especially in a straight line a little, but I think the Yamaha handled amazing. And, I knew it was good enough to win if I did my job. And everyone's job was done well, meaning Öhlins, Dunlop, Yamaha, and me. And it came together.
No, it was a dominant ride there. It was a dominant weekend for you up in Donington that weekend. And, you were sort of going up the road. So, it was good for a whole bunch of, Red Bull, everyone. I don't know whether that was Red Bull's first win or had Catalora done a win. I'm not sure, but it was a good weekend.
Yeah, it was.
And so, as I say, deserved everything you sort of got. That was just you're building up to that. And then I think it was fairly, you for the rest of the season, you were sort of thereabouts the whole time. So, especially being the non-factory bike as well, I think you certainly you put it through its paces, and being also, as I say, I think Michelin performed well there. I mean, the Dunlop, but the Dunlop also sort of let you down in a lot of other places, so it didn't actually balance out correctly. It was either here or it was here, and had it been a little bit more consistent, I think, or there was more people running the Dunlops, I think it would have been a really good consistent year for you, and perhaps you would have stayed with that for the following year, but you couldn't sort of bank on going to another year on a Dunlop, not knowing from one race to the next if the tyre was going to work or if they were going to be round.
I should have. In hindsight, I should have. But hey, I don't know if you remember, guys, one important one to bring up, like we all flew out. I didn't get to celebrate that much because we were all on my shed with the HRC guys, a helicopter to like straight out an hour after the race, or after the press and that. We went to Heathrow, and that night we were on a plane JAL flight to test the next day for the 8 hour. And I'll never forget, remember Carlos Checa crashed down Craner Curves.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was in the race or in qualifying, might have been qualifying. And it really did some internal injuries. I knew he was hurt, but wasn't sure. I woke up the next morning to the BBC channel, World News, whatever. And Carlos is like some internal injuries, a stroke of some sort, and lost his vision. I'll never forget crying in the hotel. I thought, Carlos, that crash that he had with us, and he's blind, and he's had a stroke. I'm like, you know, and so there's some real things. I don't know if you're the same, Mick, but that you remember through the year. But I'm so glad Carlos more than came back from that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was real scary.
You know, well, motorcycle racing is still brutal today, isn't it? You know, unfortunately, you know, the highs are high, the lows are lows, and no more so with two-wheel racing. And although the bikes are a little bit probably more forgiving and the tracks are a little bit better, it's still quite dangerous. So, you know, you've got to be on top of your game, and that's why, you know, preparing yourself and making sure that you've ticked all the boxes in preparing the team and everything else, just to minimise the risk. But yeah, that was a pretty frightening episode for Carlos, and thankfully he did rebound fairly quickly and sort of only recently gave up, didn't he? As far as I'm aware, he hasn't retired that long ago, so he's sort of gone on and did he win a World Superbike Championship? I'm not sure he did.
Yeah. 2011, 11 if I remember, on Ducati.
No, he was certainly a fast guy, and you know, it was good to see.
How good's this track, mate?
Sorry?
How good's this track?
Yeah, no, Phillip Island. No, it was always, again, go back to what we said earlier, the conditions. You know, this could be a different racetrack from day one to day two, you know, with wind and with everything else, where you need to position the bike, and lap times also can vary so much. So, you know, probably it's an extreme being Phillip Island, but there's a photo there. You can see the edge of the track with a little bit of dirt on the side. So there was, you know, things have changed, but a lot of things are the same. But it is a fun track, and one of the olden style racetracks, which create great racing. And you know, like you're watching yourself here, you know, you didn't get a great start, but you roared through the pack with this one, and you know, I could see you coming, you know, but I didn't want to do what I didn't. I didn't want to repeat what I'd done the year before and throw it down the road with about a 6-second lead. So just making sure that I brought it home and to win the World Championship. I think I won also on that day. And but equally, I knew you were coming through fairly quickly. And it's only one of the racetracks you can still actually, you know, you can still make ground on people. You know, I knew I needed to break away and break that toe, because once you're in the toe, you can just keep plugging away. But you know, it's a lot of fun. I don't know about you, but I always enjoyed riding there. But the conditions, being the wind and whatever else, was always the cold temperatures, what they generally are when we go and race there. Well, we being MotoGP these days go and race there, it's a fairly challenging track on a whole bunch of fronts.
As you rightly say, Mick, you won the World Championship on that day in Phillip Island. What is that like, winning a World Championship, the peak of what anybody who's an aspiring motorcycle rider can achieve at their home circuit as well? Can you put into words what that feeling's like?
You know, there was stress for sure, you know, making sure, especially after crashing. The championship was over the year before, but crashing while leading and probably not having the pressure sort of contributed to the crashing while I was leading. But you know, equally the pressure of wanting to make sure that I don't mess up to win the championship in front of the home crowd. You know, it was certainly one of the highlights, if not the highlight of my racing career, to win in Australia, front of family, friends, and the Australian public, you know, the 5th championship. So, you know, it was great, and it was a great celebration on the podium there with Simon and I think was it Alex who finished 3rd? I think, I can't remember now.
Yeah, it was.
So that was good.
Yeah.
And what was the party like afterwards? I'm sure it was pretty good.
Yeah, I can't, you know, we're getting old, but I can't remember whether we stayed there or we went back to Melbourne. I honestly, I don't know, but, you know, may have went back up to Queensland, but you know, it was certainly a relief. I think you can see there even, you know, it was a relief to just get it over and done with, you know, championship sealed and, you know, on to the next thing, which was, you know, finish the rest of the season. So, you know, so it was certainly one of those moments in your life that all came together. And, you know, a little bit, you know, you look back on life back then as if it was it was a completely different life than what it is now. So, I was so blessed to be able to sort of experience all that and have the 10 years in the sport as I did.
And if I'm right in saying, Simon, I think you said that the 1998 Australian Grand Prix is your favourite ever race over the British Grand Prix, the race that you won, of course. Why is that?
Because I don't know if you're watching the screen there, but as Mick said, it was coming through the pack, and nothing against Donington, because I loved that track. The other thing about Donington was very unforgiving as well, which I think is a requirement for me to have really enjoyed it, meaning it's not easy, It's easy to go wrong. Same at Phillip Island. But to get a bad start, I think I was 7th on the first lap, if 7th still at halfway, and then I got going and came through, which I've mentioned before, but my heroes, you saw I got by Biaggi and Abe and Crivier and Barros, and they're heroes of mine, to do that. And the crowd wanted Mick to win. It's in Australia, but a lot of people said they wanted me to get second, so the crowd got what they wanted. I managed to keep a little bit of pressure on Mick. I knew he couldn't cruise around, or otherwise I would get through there. But it was standing on the podium in a Grand Prix after racing with your heroes and looking down at your family, because that's the only one that they could make it to, grandparents, aunties, uncles, sister, mum and dad, all standing at the bottom of the podium, and that sea of people roaring for Mick. It was pretty cool.
And Mick, we're looking at here. Go ahead, Mick.
Back at Phillip Island there too, it was, as I said, you needed to break the toe essentially. So that was the plan from the start, to get out there and just get a good buffer and then maintain. But equally, you could keep pushing. I'm not sure with the Dunlop back then, but we had concerns also with the Michelin, because the Michelin you'd blow holes in the tyre, it'd overheat, and you'd actually it'd start to debond, and which
Mick, tell me if I'm right, but I remember looking up what you ran that race, and it looked like you'd run a softer one to help get away from us in the beginning. Is that right? Yeah. And then it was a bit dodgy at the end.
I think it was. You were probably right. I can't remember exactly, but I knew that I couldn't. I needed to just go out, and then I needed to calm it down a little bit. Otherwise, I'd overheat the tyre, and then I could blow holes in the tyre. So I needed to maintain it once I felt I had a buffer, and you couldn't just keep pushing, because that back in those days at a place like Phillip Island, you could actually two flying really hard laps and overdoing it on the tyre, you could actually delaminate the tyre basically after two flying laps. So you needed to the degradation, as they now call it, but which is still what was happening back then, but we weren't sort of using that term. But you really had to tyre management on a few of those different circuits, and as you say, choose different tyres for different ways of your strategy for the race. But it worked out perfectly. I knew that qualifying wasn't too bad. I knew that if I could get away initially, then I could pull a bit of a gap, and then I had to maintain it. But I was aware that Simon was coming, because the board they'd tell me what's happening, who's coming through quick. Simon was coming through quick. I knew I had enough of a buffer, but it closed it down. I don't know if you go back through it, but I had quite a large margin, down to probably less than a couple of seconds at the when I crossed the line. But again, I needed to bring it home. I knew I needed to win that championship, and I wanted to win it there. So we never got into the challenge whether let's have a fight at the last few laps. But Simon certainly was a man of the match for that weekend or that race, no doubt. And I think even set the lap record during the course of the race. So it was as I say, that season of '98 for you was a great one, and I think for Yamaha as well, you were the standout. So it was good to see you, but it was a challenge on and off the track to stay ahead of you.
Thank you, Mick. Hey, I've got one question. I mean that sincerely, coming from you. Thanks. Hey, I've got one question for you I've never asked you about, is Imola. My first time ever there was that season, and it was quite scary on the 500 trying to learn it. And I was out there, I think was either the first, I reckon it was the very first session on track, because it really shocked me. And I think it was part of these games as well, but it was one of the most impressive things I've ever seen. I just rolled out of the box with a different tire on, and towards the end or 2/3 of the way through the first session, dry, and there's a blind left-hander coming up first half of the lap. I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah,
do you remember
going back down the hill?
Yeah, before going back down the hill. I was on the inside trying to stay out of the way, and you came over there, obviously saw me. You went over the blind brow and did one of those, Jack, you've seen one of Mick's, surfing the tarmac.
Oh, without a doubt.
Off the inside, his handlebar above his head, and the thing was fully sideways over the scariest, fastest corner on the track, and I just went, it was right when I was struggling away with this new track. To see Mick do that, it was
I was probably trying my best to hang on to it,
It was.
We've got about.
Did you?
Look, I highly doubt it. There's a few things I used to sort of, I guess, try and do some mind games, but doing something a little bit crazy, it probably all just happened. And as I say, I was probably doing my best to just hang on to it rather than put it in the wall. But I don't know. All I know is I enjoyed that track there. I enjoyed immensely, so I enjoyed all the undulations and the bumps and whatever else around that joint. So, and the good thing was that, I'd got enough feel out of that Honda in the end there that I could get away with a lot and had that much confidence with the thing moving around. So it didn't feel that crazy to me, until it all went wrong, like with everything. But yeah, I can't really remember that point in time. But that was a fun circuit. I really enjoyed that one.
We've got about 5 minutes left before, unfortunately, we could stay here all night quite happily. I would anyway. I'm sure you two want to get away. But I'm interested to know how you dealt with life after racing. Certainly from your perspective, Mick, where unfortunately that decision was taken out of your hands. How do you look back on that now? And at the time, how did you manage to deal with it and cope with it?
Well, I could have still been there, I guess, if I didn't crash. I could still be, perhaps Valentino and I could be teammates. But look, in hindsight, it probably wasn't a bad way to finish. It wasn't the planned exit. I didn't know when I was going to stop racing, to be honest. I had planned to come back after the injury, but when there was some complications, I knew that it really would be 2001 before I could have another real assault at the championship. So I decided to hang up the boots. And by the time I was physically capable of riding again, I was sort of over it. So, as I say, it's probably not a bad way to stop riding. But equally, it would have been easy. It would have been nice to park the bike, on the other hand, rather than crash the bike and walk away. But and after racing, thankfully I sort of stayed in with the racing for a few years. So with Honda as general manager of racing with them, and that enabled me to sort of, I guess, get some more of that racing bug out of me and see life from a different side of the fence. And I quite enjoyed that. And then I was there. I think I stayed in the paddock for about 4 or 5 years, and then moved away and did some other things. So, as I say, it was a great part of my life, and I'm still very much attached to motorsports of all disciplines. But at this point in time, I'm not in the paddock, but you never say never.
Who knows? I'm sure we'd love to see you back in the paddock. And Simon, obviously, you are still in the paddock now as our very own pit lane reporter. You're loving that job, as I know. How do you look back on your career? Is there anything that you would change? Any regrets at all?
I would say if you're asking regrets, the only thing would be not to change that tyre brand that we mentioned earlier, so I could at least have another few seasons in the 500s, you know. About my career, you know, I was never one of these guys that imagined me as world champion, you know, myself. I just wanted to ride that beautiful machinery that we all looked at the magazines, you know, that, you know, those one-off factory bikes. I wanted to ride one against the best guys of the world, and Dad doesn't have to pay. That was literally my dream. And I got to do it, you know. And not only Dad didn't have to pay, it paid for my houses, you know, one in Aussie and one in Europe, and that is more than my dream come true, you know. So I'm totally happy. You said about retiring. Retiring, I think, was really hard. I saw it was hard for other racers. One in mind is Raymond Roche. I spent a lot of time with him the year he retired. Great guy. He was really good to me. I stayed with him in France, and I saw him struggling with not having the focus of, you know, and the adrenaline of racing. And I struggled, and I didn't even know I was struggling. You know, it wasn't until Paul Jonesy, Scouser ex-teammate, came, stayed with me and told me, you know, Simon, what's wrong, you know? And I said, what do you mean? He goes, every time I come, you're angrier, you know? And it wasn't until that moment, if my wife had said it, I wouldn't have believed her, you know? But I knew Jonesy just said it with no other, you know, ulterior motive. And it made me realize I think I was depressed, trying to figure out what to do after racing, you know? And I've got a tip for the thing that helped me figure it out was it's not about me anymore. It's about my wife and kids. And it wasn't until I realized that I got happy, you know, because racing for me was quite a selfish thing. It's all about you know, you've got to. Anyway, sorry to bore you with that, but that was my racing retiring.
No, that's an important part, and certainly having that perspective on life change, I'm sure, has helped you into the position that you are today.
I'm a happy boy. I get to teach on track with Moto Voodoo, and then I get to talk about motorbikes with the best guys in the world in the paddock and on the bikes, you know. Yeah, happy boy.
And the good news is, Simon, you haven't got to wait too much longer before you can get back to the day job as well. Just over a month, we'll be in Jerez for the start of the 2020 MotoGP season. Anyway, on tonight, thank you very much to both of you, to Simon, to Mick. Both of you have been absolutely superb. We're supposed to be doing this for about 50 minutes. I think we've gone a little bit over, but I'm sure nobody cares too much. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jack. And Mick, I hope we get to see you at some races.
Well, if I'm allowed to come, I'll try and come along. You know, I'm not sure what the restrictions will be with all this motorsport going on at the moment. But anyway, best of luck with the season out there. I'll be watching, and if I can attend, I'll see you then.
And of course,
Thanks,
if you've missed any of tonight's show or our first episode with Alex Rins and Kevin Schwantz, you can watch it on demand at the MotoGP website. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time for another episode of MotoGP Live, a sit-down with. You can use the hashtag MotoGP Live on social media to let us know who you want me to chat with in 2 weeks' time. But until then, thank you very much to Simon and Mick for tonight. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night.
See you guys.